Quinn in the morning.
It is GenX.FM, Quinn hanging out, and this morning, a guy who's had a long history throughout professional wrestling, and maybe some that you don't know. It is Kevin Thorn, but you might know him better on the scene as Kevin Thorn, or originally Mordecai. Good morning, Kevin. Thanks for making time.
Hey, man. Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Now, we are going to see you on the 6th, and that is at Cold War Primal Conflict Wrestling. And it's an interesting time in professional wrestling because there might have been a time that the indies didn't get the respect that necessarily they deserve. But I think someone who described it best, Paul Bearer, who we lost a few years ago, says that's where your first show is going to be. And if you have a career arc, you might go somewhere else, but that's where your last show is going to be as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it pretty much, you always find yourself... it's like the Kid Rock song, you find yourself in the same situation on the way up as you do on the way down. I mean, you eventually kind of end up right back where you started in some way or another. And unless you're an icon like Hogan and Undertaker, and well, hell, Hogan's even come back to the indies a little bit and done autograph signing. So it's always the same.
It's that way with any form of entertainment. We're not just talking about professional wrestling, but anyone who's a singer or entertainer, and that's what people need to understand, is that this is a form of entertainment. Now, I've been a fan since I was a kid, and so you learn to appreciate it more as an art form. How did you get into professional wrestling?
Man, I got into professional wrestling kind of as a dumb luck kind of thing. I was raised in Memphis, Tennessee on USWA. Jerry Lawler and all those guys that came through there and stuff, and I remember sneaking over to friend's house on Saturday morning to watch it because I wasn't allowed because my dad was a pretty strict Baptist and didn't find that wrestling was making me mature to be a fine young man, so I kind of snuck over there and watched it here and there and everything else, and thought it was great. And one thing led to another, and I was managing a Gold's Gym. I was a morning manager of the Gold's Gym, and Psycho Sid Vicious was coming in at the time, and he was working out. He just kind of coming off of breaking his neck and stuff like that. So he's rehabbing, kind of off the scene. And his workout partner kept missing, and he finally was like, "Hey, you want to spot me?" And one thing led to another. We just started working out, and I, at the time I never, thought about, hey, can you train me, all this other stuff. It was more or less camaraderie of working out. And one day Sid decided that, there's a wrestler who just passed away, Buddy Wayne, and Buddy Wayne had a ring in his backyard, and Sid was like, "Hey, I'm going to go to Buddy Wayne's house today and work out." And I'm like, "Okay, great. Well, what are you asking you? Well, why don't you come with me and you can run the just tool around if you want and everything else." And I remember getting there, and the ring was basically kind of torn apart, wasn't really put up fully yet. And Buddy Wayne's son Aubrey started putting the ring together, and putting the slats down that looked like they were about to rot through. Then rolled out this carpet that had nothing but rats and mice and all this other dead crap in it. And I'm going, what the heck, man?
Right.
They clean it off and throw the tarp on top, and getting it close. Watching on TV, you see this ring, and you think it's the greatest thing ever. But if you really look back at Memphis wrestling and stuff like that, you realize just how crappy the USWA ring was for how much money they made.
Yeah.
I've never seen, you look back, they were showing a bunch of Mongolian and Stomper clips this week, because he passed away. And you're sitting there looking at this ring going, how in the hell did these guys not die? And that was pretty much my first, looking at it going, this is basically small radiator hose or water hose with some wire running through it, but every so often the wire is sticking out of it. So you want me to run these ropes with this fine little wire here and there that's going to stab me in the back. Sure, why not?
Well, especially guys that size back then, when you were still dealing with the land of the giants, where these guys are 6'6", 300 pounds plus, and those guys, you talk about the equipment, the money was going somewhere. It just wasn't going into the set.
Yeah, it never was, and I mean, that's where, Vince, WWE, took it and made it such a production, which, it's good and it's bad too, I think, sometimes. But I mean, it's definitely amazing knowing, hell, you look back, they didn't even have ring aprons.
Right.
They you saw right up underneath the ring, and I guess that was kind of cool because you kind of saw. But I mean, think about all the advertisements. Some
missed opportunities.
Yeah, it could have sold and everything else for this, for these rings. But I mean, hell, they didn't even have turnbuckle pads. The Memphis Championship or the USWA ones. Wrestling has definitely evolved.
Sure.
As far as that goes. Now, have I been in some crappy rings on the independent still? Yes. Yes, I have. There's always one that you'll start to walk around the ring to kind of check it out, and then all of a sudden you're like,
hit that soft spot.
and you're like, you got to watch that out. And the guy across from you has worked in that promotion for years. He goes, it's like that every time. Oh, it's good.
Yeah, just avoid those three corners. If we work over here, we'll be fine.
Yeah, nobody does anything about that. Now you got to watch how hard you hit the corners because those tend to break too. Yeah, it's all comical, and that's how you got to take it.
Well, sure. Now, one thing that you did say back there, you said about your dad being the Baptist preacher, and here's my other question for you: is that you talk about Vince and how he cleaned up the sport of professional wrestling, turning it into the entertainment company. But when you first got your big taste with WWE, the character of Mordecai, was that kind of based around your dad, the Baptist preacher?
Yeah, it definitely was. Kind of geared towards Catholicism a little bit too, because like for me, like I always thought, there's just something mystical, about all these people worshiping a man that never was Jesus.
Right.
We care more about the Pope than we do, and not to get into too much into religion, but and I thought, well, here it is, Mordecai could be that guy, but in the long run, it was going to end up being that Vince was, basically God to me, kind of thing. The almighty guy that I was, always talking about was Vince. But with that, you go into the booth to confess and all this other stuff, and I always just found it so interesting. Organized religion as a whole. I went to a church called Bellevue Baptist, which is just ginormous in Memphis, Tennessee. And there's ways that I think the system manipulates the weak-minded to fall down and be walked on. And I think that was kind of the premise of it all. Is I've been drinking the Kool-Aid for so long that I wanted to use the Kool-Aid for myself.
Sure. Well, and here's one thing, you say you don't want to get on the religious tip, but the fact is wrestling, if it's done right, it gets into the psychological tip. And when you can touch into someone's brain and, that suspension of disbelief that every fan goes in, we know that there's a predetermined outcome, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't take away from the athleticism. And that also doesn't take away from the danger that you guys put yourself through every single day. It is a physical aspect. And now more than ever, you have to be more of an athlete now than ever before.
Oh yeah, 100%. And with the cycle, like in OVW, I was doing a character called Seven, which was based off the 7 deadly sins, and that kind of transformed into the Mordecai thing, and everything else. And it's definitely psychological. You're talking about gluttony, sloth, all these things that would make people think. When you're calling the fat bastard in the front row, why is he picking on him? Oh, he is kind of gluttonous.
Right.
He is, he is lazy. He is this, that kind of thing. And, my sin was always the wrath on him, so we're all sinners, in our own special little way.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, so you had the Mordecai character, and then that quickly went away, repackaged later as Kevin Thorn, but you talk about those 7 deadly sins. What was it that led to your separation from WWE? You know, everyone has their own story, and I'm sure there's your side of it that maybe hasn't gotten out there as much. So when the ECW was repackaged and brought back out under the WWE banner, we saw the debut of Kevin Thorn and Ariel, which seemed like a great character at the time with you know, could have had legs for many years, but it seems like your legs were taken out from underneath you.
And yeah, it was another man. You know, I've never been good at the politics in the back.
Right.
You know, I don't know. I'd much rather do without them. I like who I like. I'm not going to kiss ass, and who I don't like, it's just the way it is. If I don't trust you, I don't like you, you know, kind of thing. And I don't see that I have to kiss your ass all the time. And maybe I should have kissed a little bit more ass when I was up there. But when, you know, Dusty was writing TV, me and Dusty got along so great, and they had so many cool ideas. And, you know, Dusty saw me going against The Undertaker, you know, and it was always supposed to be that with Mordecai, you know, but Dusty really pushed for it. And, you know, and Vince was starting to get on board with it. And then, you know, Vince would stop me in the hall and be like, I don't want you to wear a red tie. I want you to wear a black tie. Okay. I want you to take those red streaks out of your hair. You know, I want you to go all black. You know, all this stuff that was making me look more like The Undertaker.
Right.
You know, and I'm just going with it. But the reason why I always had the red tie and the red streaks in my hair and some of the stuff I was doing is so I wouldn't look like The Undertaker.
Sure.
You know, for say, you know. Mark was a good friend of mine, and we always talked about things, and he was on board with it too. You know, I cut several promos, you know, that never aired or anything else that, you know, the office loved and everything else. But in Detroit, it was right before we were going on a European tour. I ended up wrestling. Crap, I forget who it was, but anyway. It was kind of a squash match type of thing, but by that time I was wearing the black tie. My hair was all black, all this other stuff, and I go out there and have the match. And I come to the back, and Vince stops me. He goes, "Who the fuck do you think you are?" And I go, "Oh, hold on, can I?"
You're all good. Don't worry about it. You're all good, man. We're online, so yeah, we're all good.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
But you know, long story short, I mean, you know, he stops me and is like, "How dare you?" and all this other stuff. I'm like, what are you fucking talking about?
Right.
You're the one that's been telling me to do this. And I mean, I guess apparently, you know, someone got on one of those little headset monitors and was, you know, talking about it and feed it in, and then, you know, all of a sudden, you know, who knows? You know, you always hear the story about how guys can manipulate Vince, but Vince doesn't think he can be manipulated.
Right.
You know, and I think that was kind of the deal. Well, European tour starts and all this other stuff, and you know, I have no way of really getting back to the office and talking to Dusty and all this other shit, and they send word through the agents, hey, why don't you get a haircut while he's there and start working on, you know, getting some different attire. I do all this, I get the singlet, I do all that crap, I come out, you know, I do all that stuff that John Laurinaitis and
basically ditched the vampire gimmick almost completely at that point.
Yeah, exactly. With no storyline, no nothing. I've called the writers; they're not calling you. You know, nothing. You know, I come in and just you know, this is like, why did you cut your hair? Because your fucking cronies told me to. You know, it was kind of, it just from that point on, it was like, you know, they used me a couple more times, and it was just like, you know, I wasn't. Dusty was. I think that's about the time that maybe Dusty was finding out that he was starting to, you know, wear down and get ill, or just needed to be off the road.
Right.
And so I didn't have my contact with Dusty anymore, and it just, you know, I don't know, man. I couldn't. Nobody could give me an answer, and nobody knew what to do, and everybody was afraid, you know, of Vince's reaction, because, you know, 4 or 5 months prior to that, I'm on Vince's, you know, radar of being the, you know, the next thing. I mean, you know, I'm supposed to be going against Benoit right before that incident happened.
Sure.
I mean, they want me to be, a stiff slugger out there and everything else, and I was doing it. And then, all of a sudden, the Benoit thing happened, I cut my hair, all this other stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like, nobody wants to get near you because, they think Vince is mad at you or something. And I never got any answers.
And they're afraid that shine's going to rub off on them. I can hear in your voice, Kevin, and tell me if I'm wrong, just the confusion and walking on eggshells towards the end of your career, at least in WWE, that portion of your career, it's not the end of the book, that's just the end of that chapter. But do you feel like at the end...
Exactly.
It was walking on eggshells. It was, just to the point of confusion. And there's just almost a sense of relief I hear from a lot of guys when it finally does happen, that at least the uncertainty is no longer there.
It was 100%. And, about this time, I'd been nursing a hip injury for a long time. I tore all the cartilage in my right hip. It still bothers me to this day. And it was like, all right, well, they tried to tell me that I needed to go down to FCW at the time to repackage myself. I went down there. It was just so unorganized and everything else. And like, I was spending my own money going down there, which made no sense to me whatsoever. Right. So finally I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and just call the doctor, and I'm going to get my hip surgery scheduled and done. I went ahead and did it, and then the day of my hip surgery, John Laurinaitis calls, and he's like, Kevin, what was this? I hear you just got
Hey, Kevin, I hear you just got hip surgery.
Yep, and I'm like, yeah, John. I told our team, I told the doctors and told everybody, and they said it was going to go. And I thought you were on board with it since you didn't return any of my calls about it. Well, they've got this idea for you and the faction that you're going to lead against Taker. Can you be ready in like 6 weeks or what? Now, mind you, this surgery is like Jeter's,
right?
A-Rod's, everybody else. It's a 6 month to a year, out. I mean,
sure.
This is my hip here we're talking about. There's no fucking way.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I guess, Johnny, I'll
push.
figure it out. And I went to rehab every day for 2 hours for almost 6 weeks, and got to the point where I could get down there and at least be limited enough that if I needed to do something in the ring small, as long as I was leading the faction, I could do it.
Right.
Got down there, got with Dusty. Now Dusty's down there writing TV. We start fucking knocking out these killer promos and everything else. And, Freddie Prinze is on it, all this other stuff. I get, my doctor clears me limited, and then all of a sudden I don't hear from him.
Unbelievable.
For another 4 or 5 weeks. So I've almost I really think I ruined my hip that was when I ruined my hip the most.
Pushing too hard.
Waking up now, I've got arthritis in my hip, so it hurts on a constant basis,
Mm-hmm.
everything else, and I think I definitely destroyed it a little bit more by doing that. But then you don't get anything, and then so Raw was in Pittsburgh and SmackDown was in Baltimore, and it was a 7-hour drive from my house here in Indianapolis, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go. I don't give a shit anymore. I'm going to go.
Just show up.
I'm going to walk in, and I'm going to ask, and I'm going to, what's going on here? And, I show up, and they're like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I kind of want to know, because at that time there was a promo done by, I forget his name, but it was kind of geared towards the Undertaker. It was only on like.
I remember the guy you're talking about. It was like a Van Helsing character, and he was supposed to be almost a vampire hunter. The promos aired twice, and he disappeared.
Yep, but those were my promos.
Right?
Those were word for word my promos, and that's when I went up there. And I was like, I wrote that, I did that, I have it on tape that me and Dusty did that, and I'm like, I just want answers. Well, we're going to put you with him, but he's going to be the leader, and you're going to be the muscle. Going into a couple matches before Mania, before Shawn and Taker go, and I'm like, okay, and then I can't get any answers in Pittsburgh, so I go to Baltimore, and then Baltimore, Taker stops me in the hall and goes, "Hey, we need to talk." And I'm like, "All right, cool." He goes, "Hey," he goes, "Kid, I've got more respect for you than and all this other stuff." And he's like, "I just got in there with Vince, and Shawn and Hunter think that it's a bad idea, and they don't want to do it, and they're going to stop it." And I went, "Okay." And that's when I went, "You know what? Fuck this." I walked right into Johnny's office and I said, "Look, man, I'm getting sick of getting dicked around." I said, you couldn't give me answers when I cut my hair, why I cut my hair, and then I was supposed to all this stuff. I said, it's just not worth it anymore to me. I said, I'm a grown ass man, with a family and everything else, and I've already made my downside, so now I'm just spending my own money and turning my own wheels by going to Florida and going here, going to there. I go, it's doing me no good, and he's like, "Oh, well, let me think about this. Are you sure?" And I'm like, "No, I'm 100% sure, John, that I'm tired of it. I'll figure it out on my own somewhere else. And then you get to run around that Johnny's going to call Japan for you, and I'll get you booked over there, kid. Don't worry about it." And as soon as you get the papers and everything else, you never hear from Johnny again. But whatever.
Well, here we are on the other side of it, man. And like we talked about when the conversation started, we're back to the indies where it's a little more intimate feel. And you're closer to the crowd, and it's a chance for you to take your experiences that you have learned and try and get the next generation ready. You have such a great crop in the independent wrestling scene of veterans who are trying to teach the younger guys, and also younger guys who are trying to make that next step up. There used to be just the big two, and for a long time, Vince McMahon and the WWE had that corporate stranglehold, the monopoly, but now with the rebirth of the indies and other outlets like Lucha Underground, and I know everyone in the industry wants to see TNA turn that ship around. What that's going to take, I don't know. But I think everybody wants more places for more guys to work.
Well, and we have to. The Lucha, right? That show's phenomenal. Christy Joseph is doing a heck of a job.
What a great show! It's written, it's scripted. You had a murder in the first season, things that you never see in professional wrestling. But it's written. It has character arcs, and it's just a very well done program. The wrestling is almost secondary to the acting and the storytelling. Yep,
it's edgy and it's new and it's it's the way that wrestling has to be now, because unfortunately, the days of kayfabe and you believe in that, such as for instance, Jerry Lawler stabbed out Terry Funk's eye, all this stuff.
Yeah.
There's now it'd be on the dirt sheets tomorrow, or not, or on the internet, Twitter, Facebook, everything else. Well, I saw Terry at Waffle House, and he didn't have I saw his eyes, and they were great. And then everybody knows.
Right.
Now granted, Terry probably would have sold it, had an eye patch on for 6 months and done it right. But the problem is this day and age, nobody knows how to do that anymore.
Well, I know that you have a few lessons to teach young Alexander James on the 6th at Cold War. A guy like you, a veteran, come in and teach this young kid who's getting a lot of looks from a lot of places around, not just in the indie scene, but actually internationally as well. I'm sure he can learn a thing or two from a veteran like you.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. The young lion that he is, as he calls himself. I think he's still Simba in a way, but even Simba had to learn a little bit to become the Lion King that he did. Normally I have an edge because I came from UCW, and I'm not afraid to do the hardcore stuff. But he's with that been doing the CCW stuff. So I watched a couple matches just trying to figure out what he does and everything else, and it was him versus Masada, and I was in awe of the beating that he took.
Yeah, that kid can take a shot. Yeah, he can.
Yeah, and normally that's what I'm good at, is giving him that first shot that makes him go, maybe maybe I shouldn't keep coming like I was, but yeah, it's definitely going to be a fight that I'm looking forward to. It's going to be it'll be a big day too, because I basically land in Baltimore. I head straight over to Collector's World in Virginia, Annandale, Virginia,
sure.
And then I come straight over to you guys. In West Virginia, so I'm making all the Virginias.
Doing the big loop out of BWI down in Virginia and then over to West by God.
Exactly. Hey, but the best part about it is hopefully, knock on wood, that this snowstorm was this past weekend and not coming up.
Yeah. I think the only cold we're gonna have to worry about is Cold War, and you're gonna heat it up inside the KOA campground.
Oh, there'll be a Cold War, that's for sure.
Can't wait to see you make your return, man. Primal Conflict Wrestling. It is next Saturday, the 6th of February already, Cold War. Kevin Thorn, just part of a great bill. If you want more details, you go to primalconflictwrestling.com. Dude, I appreciate you making the time and spending half an hour going over it. Really appreciate it. Can't wait to see you in town.
Oh man, it was a good time, man. Can't wait to meet the fans at Primal Conflict and Collector's World. And it's just good to be back out again. It's been 3 years. I kind of took some time off and got my head right. And, now it's just about, it's just fun again, to get out there and just, see the world a little bit, see some friends, meet some new friends, and, get to go out there and, get underneath those lights again, the most addicting thing on the face of this earth.
Quinn in the morning, 7 to 10. And your music, your voice around the clock. GenX.FM.